what are the planetary alignments and shifts that are influencing humanity right now, this year, and a bit onwards?
Wow. Wow. Big, 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 big. Okay, where do we start? Okay, so the one that's coming up quite soon is on the 20th of February, because this is, very close indeed. And these two planets, Saturn and Neptune, come together reliably about every 36 years. The last time they came together was in 1989, and they are very much about dissolving the old order. They're very connected to Russian history, actually. Because if you go back in Russian history, there was a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in 1917, which was the Russian Revolution, another one in 1952 to 53, birth of Putin, death of Stalin, another one in 1989, and that was in Capricorn, which is to do the sign that Saturn rules, which is to do with walls and borders and boundaries. That was the collapse of the Berlin Wall. I mean, it couldn't be more literal, November 1989. And that was the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union. So every time we have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, there is a redefinition of Russia in some way. So it's going to be very interesting this year with whatever happens, with any peace deal, who knows what's going to happen. I haven't looked into that closely, but what I do know reliably, if we go back, and I can go back even further than that, into the 1800s, there is always a redefinition of Russia in some way, of territory very often. Okay, and certainly authority figures as well. So that's, going to be fascinating to watch. So that happens very reliably every 36 years. It's very often to do with the dissolution, Neptune, of the old order, Saturn. But this year, it's happening on the 20th of February. It's a one-hit deal. It's not going to happen again. It got very close last summer, Northern Hemisphere, but it's going to happen at 044 of Aries. It hasn't happened at 0 of Aries since 4361 BC. I want to credit my very good friend Heather Ensworth for finding that in her research. Hasn't happened at 0 of Aries for almost 6,000 years. So this is pure potentiality, the very first degree of the zodiac. And so this is incredibly exciting in terms of birthing a new order, a whole new civilization. I believe that we are birthing the beginning of a new galactic society and a galactic civilization starting in 2026. And so that's going to be very powerful around new beginnings. That's going to be very powerful for people individually. So please, everybody out there, particularly if you have anything between 0 and 2 degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, you are going to have a particularly strong sense of a new beginning. But it's for everybody, actually. What new relationship, passion, home, job, geography, what's calling you that could be really new. So that's one very big deal. And it will accelerate the collapse of the old order. Saturn is the old order. It will do many, many other things as well. It's going to be a reality check on lies and deceits, and, many, many truths are going to come to light in a pretty dramatic way. And that's going to start, I think, in February as well. And it's going to come in waves through this year. And so we are going to see the accelerated collapse of the old order, but more green shoots of this new consciousness coming through as well. So that's happening. And it's a big deal, because it's so rare. Rarity gives potency. What we also have is very strong Uranian energy. And that's to do with the increased seismic activity, a lot of extreme weather and earth events. I think they will continue through 2026 because GAIA is going through shedding millions of years of trauma and going through her own rebirth. And we're in symbiosis with that. And so we have some real peak points with Uranus going through this year. If we look at 3 days before that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, we have a very powerful solar eclipse at 28 of Aquarius. That is square to Uranus. I think that could be very eruptive, disruptive, shocking, a lot of truths coming to light. Could be big seismic activity, and it could be seismic literally with earthquakes. It could be seismic politically, financially. A big truth coming to light, a big rattling of the old order. A lot of disclosure. It's going to be a lot of disclosure coming this year because so much to talk about here. Because we had a particular conjunction in 1993, which began the disclosure project of Dr. Stephen Greer. The next step in that configuration is happening this year, exact in July, in fact. We also have a very strong Uranus aspect in June, and I think that will be another wave of mass awakening, a massive one in July. And actually, if I can just hop back to April, April is a massive month of new beginnings for people. I have never, I don't think in my career, seen so many planets in Aries. If we incorporate Chiron and the dwarf planets, I think we have 8 orbiting bodies in Aries in April. That is just off the map in terms of initiation, ignition, new beginnings. I think we're going to see a huge wave of cosmic energy coming in to the Earth at that time. And through this year, I'm sorry, this is going to be a terribly long answer, Yannicka.
No, I love it. I'm so intrigued.
Okay. Dr. David Clements, who's a dear friend of mine, has talked about 6 or 7 waves of kind of evolutionary energy coming into the Earth in 2026 to awaken mankind. I don't know if the waves that he's anticipating and seeing correlate with the probability peaks astrologically that I'm seeing, but I'm seeing some real peaks. February, March and April, Aries equinox, then massive lineup in Aries in April, a big wave of energy, I think, coming in. June is very big. July is huge. So just to explain July, we have a unique astrological configuration, which I don't believe has ever happened in history before. And no astrologer has found a time in history when this has occurred. So this is a trine, 120 degree between Uranus and Pluto. And in the midpoint of that is Neptune. And it's completely symmetrical. And it becomes perfectly symmetrical in July, round about the 18th to the 20th of July, exactly. But we're going to feel it, right through the middle of this year. And so each of those planets is at 4 degrees of their sign. Pluto's at 4 degrees of Aquarius, Uranus is at 4 degrees of Gemini, Neptune's at 4 degrees of Aries. You have perfect symmetry. And so if I look back to the seed points of the seed points of any aspect is when 2 planets came together in conjunction. Okay, so for instance, the last time that the Uranus-Pluto conjunction happened was in 1965, 1966. So that was a time which was, the time of the hippies and, strong wave of love and peace and living in community and protests against war and a lot of demonstrations to demand more equality in society, whether that was coming from women or the Black Power movement or gay people's rights, whatever. There was a greater demand for equality and people living together in peace and growing food together. So that was the seed point for what is now blossoming this year, particularly in the middle of the year. You also had a conjunction between Neptune and Pluto. Back, the seed point was 1891 to 1993. 1891 to 1993. That was the birth of quantum physics, where Max Planck made the first association between matter and consciousness, that matter is derived from consciousness, but consciousness is primary. We have another step happening in that coming up this year as well. So we are going to discover a huge amount about the nature of consciousness and the nature of reality, partly because Pluto is in Aquarius and Uranus is in Gemini, reinforcing those themes. Huge about divinity, consciousness, how we create our reality, etc. You also had let me just think what I've missed. You also had, yes, which I've mentioned before, a conjunction between Uranus and Neptune in 1993, as well as Dr. Stephen Greer's disclosure project about galactic beings. You had the birth of the internet, the World Wide Web at that time, the internet becoming, much more commonly used by the public. There's going to be another jump in all of that, mass communications, to a much higher level, telepathy coming in much more fully. It's going to be there's just going to be so many developments in new forms of transport. I think we could see anti-gravity transport coming in. I think we could see flying cars. I think we could see more public transport, which is to do with magnetics, which is very quiet and clean. And I think South Korea is developing this at the moment, where it's beautiful. They have these kind of trains that run above the ground, the same level as the cherry blossom. And then they come down to pick up people, and then they go back, to sort of tree level. And that's in development right now. And I believe it works on magnetics, reversing the magnetic poles so it can rise above the ground. So we're going to see incredible developments around free energy. I think using magnetism is going to become a much bigger deal. By the end of 2026, even by then, our world is going to look very different from how it looks now. Society is going to look very different. And, that's incredible, because in general, the lives we've lived, it's been pretty predictable. You know where you're going to be at the end of a year, you're planning to go to college or buy a house, it's been pretty predictable. We're going to be making huge jumps this year, which are very accelerated compared to how we've lived our lives in the past.
To watch the full video, click the link below, and I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel.